And now on the line is Dr. Garrett McGovern. Garrett, welcome to Near FM.
Thank you, Darren. We appreciate you having me on.
Okay, Garrett, I got in touch with you today to do this interview because I saw you quoted on the News Talk website last week where you spoke about Irish society's view to alcohol, or the view of the majority of people, and I really resonated with what you said. To start off, could you tell our listeners today on Near FM a bit about your background, please, and then tell us what your work dealing with legal and illegal drug use in Ireland today entails of?
Yeah, so I'm medical director of the Priority Medical Clinic in Dundrum, which is an outpatient programme for drug, alcohol and process addictions. I've been working in the field of addiction since 1998, when the protocol for methadone treatment became kind of enshrined in law. I have been working in private practice since 2011, and as probably won't surprise you, I treat an awful lot of alcohol problems within clinical practice, but also other drugs are quite prominent. So cocaine, as you'll have seen on the recent media coverage and the stats from the HRB, is on the increase. So there's a lot of cocaine that comes through my doors. Treat pretty much all addictions: opiate addiction, benzodiazepine addiction, neuropsychoactive drugs problems, and I also treat process addictions like gambling. I have treated other process addictions in the past. They're much rarer in terms of the presentation, but I have treated shopping addiction, which is quite an interesting one, and it's not quite what people think. But it's otherwise known as compulsive buying disorder or oniomania. It's an interesting addiction, and a lot of people kind of use the phrase shopping addiction kind of lightly and laugh when you say that, but actually it's a very pervasive addiction when it arrives. But yes, alcohol, in terms of what I see, we've had a long-standing problem in Ireland in relation to our relationship with alcohol, and I'm not in any way puritanical about alcohol. I think alcohol is there to be respected, and many people can drink in a very, very responsible way and not let it govern their life. But unfortunately, there's far too many people who are running into trouble with alcohol, and there's probably the majority of those are not really quite as aware and insightful of the harms of alcohol as perhaps they might be. And we have a cultural problem with alcohol. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We tend to celebrate everything with alcohol. We sometimes don't even need to celebrate. The reasons to drink are manifold, and it's very, very commonplace and normalised in our society.
I've done loads of interviews on Near FM and Radio and Lifa over the last few years talking about the whole process of bringing in and implementing the Public Health Alcohol Act 2018. You would, I imagine, be a supporter of this legislation, are you?
Yeah, so minimum unit pricing, I think I am largely in support of it. I kind of have I don't think it's quite as black and white as kind of people think. I mean, there's no doubt about it. People are governed by cost, particularly young people, their consumption of alcohol. I don't think, this is just my own view, that minimum unit pricing is probably going to really touch the inveterate drinker or the person who's alcohol dependent, or the people I see in clinics. They will drink by hook or by crook. They'll just pay more for it. And if you look at the research, Darren, that's come out of Scotland, in relation to minimum unit pricing and their experiences with it, they're a bit further down the line. They've found that people who would be drinking heavily continue to drink heavily, but at the expense of kind of basic provisions like food and stuff like that, which is worrying. I think we need to go a step further, though. I think that I think alcohol advertising is particularly pervasive. I'm not in favour of any sort of advertising for something like alcohol. I don't think there's any justification for that. We got rid of it for smoking, and my view is that there shouldn't be advertising for alcohol. That's my own position on that. But I think if we're going to go the real, the full course on this, I think we have to change attitudes, and I don't think that can be done by legislation. That has to be done by citizens themselves, and that's tough. That's very tough. I don't know how we go about that. I really don't.
Okay. We could talk all day and longer about alcohol and indeed illegal drug misuse in Ireland, but we haven't got the time today to talk about them very in depth. There are two other drugs in Ireland that I would like to talk a bit about because I believe they are growing into much bigger problems, and you mentioned one of them already. These are cocaine and crack. Could you tell me more about your experience of these drugs, Garrett? You can talk about them one at a time if you want.
Yeah. So I in my own practice, it's sort of separated out a bit. So I work in communities that have been decimated by drug use over the years, marginalised communities, and so that would have been traditionally, these would have been services that would have been both statutory and non-statutory, sort of community and clinic-based in terms of the response to heroin addiction. So those clinics have been around for a few decades now, the guts of 30 years, certainly 25 years. What we've noticed over the last, to be honest with you, I've noticed it over the last 15 years, possibly even longer, but there's been a worsening crack problem in a lot of these communities. Crack cocaine is not a drug that tends to affect the more affluent communities. It's without a shadow of a doubt, it's affecting communities that are already suffering from social inequality, in some cases poverty and crime, and it's having a devastating effect both on the health of people who use that drug, but also in terms of their social health. And I'm talking about things like drug intimidation, drug deaths, and I'm talking about deaths as in DEBTS. There are drug deaths also, and there's a mortality associated with this drug. There's no question about that. But I've seen people who wouldn't ordinarily get involved in drug dealing now getting involved in drug dealing in order to service their habit. It's awful. And if you've ever seen anybody who has a very, very advanced crack cocaine habit, the thing that strikes you is that the weight is falling off them. They are really, really have sunken cheekbones, and they're really, really not eating. So a lot of what their intake is really just crack cocaine, nothing else. They're not eating it. There's no balanced diet, nothing. And the effects on their mental and physical health is devastating, particularly their mental health. There's no doubt that cocaine, whether it be powder or the crack, is particularly bad on the health of one's heart. So people can get heart attacks, they can get arrhythmias where their heart can stop, and also they can increase the viscosity of the blood, leading to strokes. It can also cause bleeding. There's a lot of things that can happen to someone who uses crack. But what I see more often than other problems is the effect on one's mental health, and it's devastating. But equally, in the same communities, I have powder cocaine is also a major problem. And powder cocaine obviously is a major problem right across the board. They're fairly stark figures that have come out of the HOP in recent weeks.
Crack is a kind of a different form of cocaine. So the two drugs, cocaine and crack, are kind of the same kind of thing, are they?
Yeah, so they're pretty much the same parent drug. The problem is the way in which they're taken is different. So powder cocaine largely is snorted, sometimes injected. The powder is dissolved, and sometimes speedballed with heroin. Crack is different. It's kind of cracker is a different form of cocaine. So essentially, the powder is dissolved in usually bicarbonate. The solution kind of dries, and it produces these rocks, and these rocks then are smoked, and it's the vapor from the smoke that is how one gets the high. The problem with it is that people tend not to kind of use it once. The sort of context of its use is very much different. There are patients that I feel are smoking this right throughout the day. It's a very short-lived, but more intense high, or tends to be. And its addictiveness they're both quite addictive, but its addictiveness in the way in which it's taken is probably greater. And with that, obviously, comes debt, and that's where some of the real problems arise when people get into substantial amount of money problems as a result of having this habit.
Okay, remember I was in college in England about nearly 20 years ago, and I did an interview with a drugs worker working for the health service in Wolverhampton, where I was in college, and he told me in that interview that if you go to where cocaine is grown, the plant, you will find people in the area eating the leaves of the plant, and it doesn't seem to do them any harm. But he said that when drugs like cocaine gets sold on the street as cocaine, that basically most people don't know what is in the drugs. Would you concur with that, Garrett?
I would. I strongly concur with that. That is part of the problem. I mean, when you look at cocaine from the moment it's produced, as you say, from the coca leaf, and then it finds its way onto the Dublin streets, it's usually adulterated with other stuff and cut with other stuff. And I have seen in clinical practice over the years people come a cropper because of stuff that it's been cut with. So that's the problem with illegal drugs, Darren. You're never really quite sure what you're getting. You're not sure at all what you're getting. You're sort of trusting the dealer. The dealer doesn't even know what's in it. There's no testing of these drugs. And I know that in vogue now is the whole, mainly to do with festivals, but this whole idea of drug checking and drug testing to see what's in stuff, which I think is largely a very, very good idea. I have to say I'm very much in favour of it. But you're right. I mean, they don't know what's in it. And, people, when they buy food or they drink alcohol or even smoke cigarettes, at least those ingestants, you might say, have some sort of quality control. There's none with coke.
Yeah, I meant to ask you this question at the start of the interview, but I know you're saying you have a private practice. I believe it's in Dundrum, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed.
But you work for the HSC as well, don't you? So
I do. I treat mainly opiate use, so it's mainly heroin use, but also in recent years we've had a bit more of a influx of patients with codeine, analgesic kind of addictions, But yeah, so I work in the HSC and I also work in my private practice.
It's only within the last, I think it's less than a year and a half, that RT Primetime had a feature on crack in Dublin, and they were saying in that feature that the use of the drug was mostly confined to parts of Ballymun and parts of Tala, but I believe in the inner city since then, and maybe other areas of Dublin, like it has grown a lot, even in the last year and a half. Have you seen that as well, yeah?
Yeah, I have to say I see more of it out in sort of the suburbs, particularly in Tallaght. Funny enough, there's been a problem. But yes, in the south inner city where I work, I also see it. I also work in Crumlin. And I also work in other areas that most people would think are maybe a bit more kind of affluent, like Dundrum and Sandyford, the big catchment area of my clinic. But it's on the upturn. There's no doubt about it. It's really becoming a problem. I think cocaine across the board, whether it be crack or whether it be powder cocaine, is it's just continuing. I don't want to use the word exponential, but it sort of feels like that sometimes.
I remember my friend telling me recently that his brother told him his brother works in some kind of banking industry in London, but he was saying that like loads of people in his industry use cocaine even during the day in work. I just find it hard to understand. He could have been exaggerating, I don't know, but I find it hard to understand how people can function if they're taking cocaine during the day. It's bad enough taking it on a Friday or Saturday night, but if you're taking it at work, surely I think you wouldn't be able to do your job properly. What do you think?
Well, funnily enough, that's not really probably stimulants are interesting because if you look at say amphetamines, which people would have traditionally taken to improve concentration, it would have been given in the armed force. It would have been taken by people in the armed forces over many decades, to keep people awake and keep them more alert. Obviously, students would have, the experience of students who would use amphetamines to keep them awake during long hours of study. I think cocaine, although it's a different stimulant, it doesn't sedate you, so you are quite alert, although it's quite a short kind of duration of action. So the problem and I've seen this exactly how you describe people taking it during the day. I have had patients who would take it on a coin, literally a 10-cent coin, and be taking it every couple of hours throughout the day. In terms of whether you can do your job and stuff like that, I think people do their job. I suppose when you get in under the bonnet, you might see something different, which is they become a bit less reliable. And it's very, very hard to have a cocaine dependence and keep all the balls in the air and, produce the quality of work that you do and the quality of relationships. It's just very difficult to do. And that's what I end up seeing. The whole thing unravels and then they end up coming to me and they just can't deal with it anymore. I mean, the effect on their mental health is just astounding. I mean, cocaine is awful. And then you throw in, say, the combination of alcohol and cocaine and drinking to harmful or hazardous levels as well. It really is very, very difficult, I have to say, to function and give the best of yourself.
Okay, we could talk all day about this. Okay, but we do it another time. We talk more another time. To come towards the end of our interview today, Garrett, bearing in mind that we are probably going to at some stage have a citizens' assembly on drug use in Ireland, can you tell me if that process of having a citizens' assembly you think would be a good thing? And maybe related to that, could you tell me if there are any other developments, maybe looking at the bigger picture that you're aware of, but most of the average public mightn't be unaware of that, are happening that are a bit positive, along with maybe a citizens' assembly?
Yeah, it's a good set of questions there, Darren. I'm just maybe make a comment before I answer the specific question about a citizens' assembly. I am a little bit, I hasten to say despondent, but I really kind of pessimistic about the way, and I know we've had COVID over the last couple of years, but even beyond that, I am a bit pessimistic the way a lot of the, initiatives that we have on the table, such as, supervised injection rooms, the possibility of moving to a health-led approach and decriminalisation of possession of drugs, they've kind of gone on the back burner. We had a period there a few years ago where we were all on the up. We were really looking positive. The legislation was passed for supervised injecting rooms. It looked like it was going to open. Mentioned Smirt's Key won the tender. I remember doing an interview with, I think it was Brendan Courtney down at the site in Merchants Quay. The site was a wreck now, but it was in the basement of Merchants Quay. I was really excited. It was a perfect location, and then of course there was the whole planning commission furore, and it hit the bricks really. So that has saddened me really. I mean, I'm beginning to wonder, are we going to get to see a supervised injection room? Because I was attending conferences and everybody was, this news was travelling around the world and people were getting excited and going, Ireland has moved into the 21st century, and I was said, oh yeah, this time next year we'll have it, and that's going back to 2017, 2018. So from that point of view, it looks like we've kind of done a lot, but not actually achieved a lot. We haven't got a huge amount over the line. Bringing me on to the Citizens' Assembly, I think the Citizens' Assembly is a great idea, but I'm again a little bit worried about the fact that it was meant mooted to be maybe this year, and now they're going to do it next year. That's fine. It's June now. We'll wait another 6 months or something like that. But I just hope that it's done properly, because the Citizens' Assembly is only as good as the material that it's given. And I sometimes do think that there are agendas within the corridors of Leinster House that maybe don't want a more health-led approach. They want to stay in the kind of prohibition era where we just try and police our way out of drug problems. I think there is a cohort of people, far too many in Leinster House. But that brings me on to another issue, and I'll finish at this, is that a lot of the people in Leinster House, there are some very, very well-informed people, but many of the politicians, in my experience, are quite ignorant of what drug policy is about, and what we're trying to achieve by having a more health-led approach. They don't want it, but they don't tend to educate themselves on the nuts and bolts of drug policy and drug markets, etc.